Hey folks, it's Mike Caruso, publisher of the Fisherman magazine, and today we're going to winterize the Fisherman's 21-foot Allied, and it's got a 70-horse Tohatsu two-stroke EFI engine. It's got to withstand these brutal northeast winters, and that's just about to happen. We fished through the season, and now it's time to put her to bed. Want to clean it, lubricate it, and protect it. Really all aspects of the boat. We're going to use CRC marine products that really fit for just about everything you're going to want to do to protect this thing, whether it be the engine, the electrical systems, the fiberglass, the trailer. Really everything needs attention this time of year. So next year, when you take the cover off, you have problem-free operation, safe, fun, and effective. Winter storage is essential. Okay, the first thing I want to do to start the prep process for really the motor and the fuel system is to treat the fuel. Fuel doesn't fare well through the winter. With ethanol, you can have phase separation, and you really want to preserve the fuel because it's expensive, but more so, it will varnish the engine. We're going to treat this particular engine with Store and Go from CRC. It's an ethanol fuel treatment and a stabilizer. And you want to put the appropriate amount for storage, not for regular use. This can be used throughout the season and really help your engine and your fuel system perform to its peak. But right now for storage, we're putting a little bit more in. It's 1 ounce for every 5 gallons of fuel. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to run that treated fuel through the engine and treat the inside of the engine. But before we do that, we got to think about how to cool the engine. So we're going to hook our hose up to our earmuffs, and I'll show you how to hook these up. Okay, so what we're going to do is take these earmuffs and we're going to slide them over the lower unit. These are the water coolant intake ports, and we want to make sure that these muffs go directly over that, so that when we turn on the hose, water gets siphoned into the water cooling system and keeps and protects the engine. Also flushes it out. Okay, we're about to start the engine, and what will happen is that treated fuel with the CRC Store and Go will make its way to the engine and start to coat all the fuel system parts. Additionally, with the water flowing through the engine, it's going to flush out any contaminants that might be in the water coolant system. I want to do this for about 10 or 15 minutes to really be sure that the fuel is making it from the tank to the engine. Okay, so we've treated the fuel system. The next step is really to treat the internal parts, the moving parts of the engine. And so this is a two-stroke EFI. So there's no carburetor, it's fuel injected. So what I've done is I've put some 2-cycle oil into the water fuel separator filter and run it through already. For 4-stroke engines, you would do the same. For carburetor engines, you would actually remove the air filter and spray fogging fluid into those carburetors so that the internal parts get coated. But our internal parts are getting coated because we've treated, really put oil into the fuel lines by way of the water separator. But the next thing we're going to do is actually spray fogging oil into the cylinders. Let me show you how it's done. Okay, so to get oil into the cylinders, we've got to take the spark plugs out. You do need a ratchet wrench with the appropriate spark plug head or socket, and you just got to basically find that socket and start to pull them off. Okay, the next thing you want to do is basically just inspect those spark plugs, make sure they're in good shape. This would be the time to replace them. This is the CRC Marine Engine Store. It's a fogging fluid. It'll stick to the internal parts, and what we really want to do is get the cylinders, the cylinder walls, the rings, everything coated with this oil. I mean, it's what's going to protect it against any kind of corrosion, any kind of rust buildup, just any kind of friction. And so I'm going to spray it right into the spark plug holes, and I'm going to put a significant amount in there. You can't really put too much. Okay, so now that I've got the CRC Engine Store fogged the engine up, the cylinder walls are coated, but really we want to go a step further. We want to have that, that fogging oil really get further displaced throughout the cylinders, the rings, the crankshaft. And what I'll do is I'll actually turn the engine over. Not start the engine, but just turn it over a few times so that those cylinders are moving and dispersing the fogging oil throughout the crankcase. To do that, though, you don't want to start it. You really just want to cover up the spark plug areas, because some of that fogging oil could come shooting out and make a mess. Okay, so after we turned it over a little bit, I'm just going to spray it one more time. Okay. Clean any excess around those spark plugs, and should be good to go. That should be good to go. The next step, pretty simply, is put those spark plugs back in, connect them up, and that should do it. So while you have the engine cowling off, this is a good time to clean the engine up. Take a rag, clean any kind of debris off of it. If there's any leaves that get in there, in this case I've got a few, I picked them out. You want to kind of prep it for giving it a coating of this CRC 656. This stuff is amazing. It's an all-purpose lubricant that I like to kind of liberally spray on all over the engine. But basically it'll give it a nice protective coating, and on the latches. Just a very light, any kind of moving parts. Over here I got the throttle. Anywhere you see a screw, nut, bolt, give it a hit. And then down inside, deeper into the cowling. I'm going to do this actually to a number of different places on the boat as I get into some of the hatches. Any moving part, really, this stuff is great. It's also great for your fishing reels when you are winterizing and maintaining those. Great stuff. You got to have a can of this at all times. Okay, so now that we have the engine fogged, we have the fuel treated, we've flushed the coolant system. Now we're going to move on to the lower gear case. And what I have here is a CRC product. It's a High Point 90 lower unit gear lube. We're basically going to replace the fluid from this lower unit with this new stuff. And you want to do that every season because, number one, it's very good practice to check to see if any of the seals leaked water into the lower gear case. And you can tell when this oil comes out, if we see any white kind of milky fluid mixed in with the oil, we're going to know that there's been some water infiltration, and that could be a killer to your lower unit system. So we're going to first check, then we're going to replace. The way to do this, not very difficult. There's two screws. This is the drainage screw, which when I release that drain screw and unscrew that, the fluid won't come out yet. It's only when I take out the upper screw that allows the ventilation to occur and for the oil to come out. So what we want to do, loosen the screw. The oil won't come out completely, or the grease won't come out completely at this point until I take the upper screw. Okay, so now when we take the upper screw off, that creates the ventilation for all the oil to come out of the bottom area of the lower gear case. And there it goes. You want to give this a little bit of time to drain completely, and we're looking for any kind of really anomaly in the oil. Anomaly meaning grayish or whitish color. Anything that indicates that there's water that's infiltrated into the lower gear case. And this looks good. Okay, so we're going to prep the containers here of the lower unit gear lube. Got to cut these tips off first. You want to do both of them at the same time. You want to have your tools next to you as well. Okay. Can be messy. So what we're going to do is basically we're going to put the tube of gear lube into the bottom screw while we leave the upper screw open. And the idea here is to get enough liquid to go all the way up to the top. This is the oil level. So as we hit the capacity, it'll come spilling out. At that point, we put the screw in. That suction is kind of created again. We take away the venting so the oil stays in there, and then we quickly go ahead and then put the screw in the bottom. So let's begin. Okay, the oil is now coming out. So what we want to do is you want to be able to get that venting screw back into the vent, because once we put that in, the oil won't leak out of the bottom anymore. Okay, so the trick is now to get the screw back in on the bottom side of the lower unit. And that's it. Clean up the mess. And you're on to the next part. Okay, next what we want to do is basically put some marine grease, the CRC water-resistant marine grease, on every one of the little ports. There's several ports revolving around the steering column, the hydraulic area. These grease ports, so you want to have a grease gun and you want to be able to squirt inside of those ports a significant amount of grease. This is the steering grease fitting. Basically just want to pump some into the column. Sufficient amount in there. So while we have the grease gun out, we're also going to hit the hubs of each one of the tires. There's a grease fitting there as well. Basically we're just going to pump it in. Usually you start to see the grease come out of the hub. That's how you know it's filled. Okay, so I also like to use some white lithium grease. CRC makes some marine grease that I like to hit some of the parts that the marine grease that we use the gun for to get into the ports didn't hit. So several areas that are basically part of the steering and the tilt are good places to hit with lithium grease. So I also like to hit some of the areas like my trim tabs with lithium grease. Okay, now that we're through winterizing the engine, it's time to move on to the rest of the boat. So we'll use a Mary-Kate products. In the bilge, I'm going to use Big Bully. It's a bilge cleaner. You basically put about half a bottle into your bilge, spray a lot of water in there, and run your bilge. Cleans it out nicely. You couldn't possibly get down there with a brush, so this stuff does the trick. Next up, if you have a heavily barnacled or algae or any kind of stains on your hull, you want to use a hull and bottom cleaner. Mary-Kate's on-off will do that as well. Didn't really need to do too much of that with this boat because, you know, I've been cleaning it throughout the season and I keep it on a trailer. But if you keep your boat at the dock, you're going to need to clean that hull. Then you're always going to get grease and grime on your boat, and it it could happen on your deck, it could happen on your gunnels. You want a good grease cleaner. Mary-Kate has a heavy-duty grease cleaner. It's also an engine degreaser. You want to have that on hand as well. And then you really want to get a coat of wax. You want to clean oxidation or any kind of fish guts that's going to get on the boat, and prep it for a thicker coat of carnauba wax. But Mary-Kate's Maxi Wax is an excellent cleaner, and it'll have your boat looking great in no time. Okay, so now we're inside the boat. And basically you want to clean everything. Anything you can see, you want to get the brush out, you want to use an environmentally safe type of boat cleaner, a deck cleaner, and you want to get it all clean before you put the cover on it. But even before that, I take my battery out, I leave it in the garage on a trickle charge. I then take some premium CRC marine electronic grease and I hit the terminals of the battery. Any other areas like my marine electronic connections, of course I remove my electronics, but I hit those connectors with some grease as well. And then once everything's out of the boat and it's entirely clean, I finish it off with some moisture absorbent type containers like these from Mary Kate. This is a moisture control bag and these are little containers. They just keep everything dry through the winter. No mold will form, everything stays nice and clean. So I hope you've learned something today about winterizing your boat, and we always encourage you to use your manufacturer's instructions and their recommendations for anything you do to your boat. But these Mary Kate products and these CRC products are really helpful. Just about anything you need to do with the boat to keep it protected through the season. So next year, when you take that cover off, you're ready to go fishing. I'm Mike Caruso with the Fisherman magazine. I hope you have a great winter, and we'll see you in the spring.